Fellow passenger here, welcome to my space and to my face. This is the first time I appear on my channel where you can see me speaking to you. That feels really strange to me, really uncomfortable. Sorry it's taken such a long time to make this video, and part of that is because I've been working on this space. This is the first time in my life where I've had a dedicated space where I can have all my kit, not having to pack it up or plug in exactly what I'm using on that particular day. There's still some work to do, but I feel really proud of it. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to patch something up on the modular synth, and I'm going to talk some rubbish about life while I'm doing it. And I'm not going to promise anything perfect, but that's part of this plan that I'm currently working on, which is to make at least 1 minute's worth of music every day for 100 days without interruption. And I'm on day 56 maybe? I can't really remember, but I'm posting them every day on Instagram. Some of them are awful, some of them are okay. The occasional one might even have something great in there, but it's not about perfection. It's literally just getting into the routine and posting stuff. So before you get bored with me talking to you, I'm just going to do a little cut and you can hear where we're roughly going to end up today. So without further ado, I'm just going to take you on this journey, and if you feel you're able to sponsor me on Patreon, you will be able to take the individual raw stems from the modular and use them however you like. So I'll put a link in the description to my Patreon, and please check it out. There's lots of previous content on there, Max for Live devices, Ableton projects, all sorts of stuff. Check it out. Thank you very much for watching, and now we are going to jump over to the modular. So I'm clocking this using Ableton, hooked up with a Behringer swing, passing on the clock to the Varigate 4 sequencer. And then I just take the clock out of that one and plug it into the Varigate 8 Plus. And then I got a third sequencer, which is the Metropolis from IntelliJail. But I think I'm not going to use the clock. I'm going to use a gate out, so I can send out a pattern sequence rather than a steady clock into it. So we just get something a bit more rhythmical. So we got all in all 3 sequences going. So we got 167 BPM coming out of Ableton. And now we can set up a random pattern for the IntelliJail to run by. And the great thing with Varigate 8 is that you can set probability a bit like you can do with the sequences in Ableton, just to create a bit of variation. And then I take the pitch out of the Metropolis and send that in to the Twin Peak filter from Klangbau Köln, which I think is very much overlooked. It's an amazing module. I don't use it much for filtering. I just send CV into it, which results in beautiful pinging resonance sounds. So I'm going to hook that up to the ES9 from Expert Sleepers, which is basically a little sound card, so you can just get multiple inputs. You can see the signal coming into Ableton there. And you can see those stacks there. I just picked one up. Is a nice cheap way of splitting a signal. If you need one signal out but you need it to go to multiple places, you can buy a mult module, but that will take up space in your rack and it will be much more expensive. Those little things, they cost about £2 each or something, and you can buy them in multi-packs on eBay. So all right, we need to get a beat going, so I'm going to use the 4MS sampler to find a nice kick drum, and the samples in there are quite loud, so I'm going to put that into a VCA, so we can change the volume. That's the mutable instrument veils, which is both a mixer and a VCA. And then I'm going to use another one of those signal splitters, because there's a bit of distance between the two racks, and also I might want to send that signal somewhere else eventually. We're going to talk a bit more about that further on, but I'm going to plug that into the next channel in the sound card, or the ES9. Yeah, we can see that the drums are coming through there on the first channel. I think there's this thing with working with modular. You start off somewhere, and somewhere is usually not particularly good. And when you least know it, all of a sudden you just slip into this zone where all of a sudden you got something really unique that at least I wouldn't have been able to entirely plan for. You sort of more set a direction, and then you see where you end up. Now we're going to need to improve this beat. Let's add something that sounds a bit like a snare. We used a similar Satiritus alter for this. I'm not going to go for something that sounds exactly like a snare. It's going to be more just something that can be in that frequency spectrum. But yeah, not quite a snare there, but yeah, we got something that we can just add to this rhythm for now. And as mentioned, we haven't reached that particular point yet when all of a sudden you're in an interesting space. But I hope we will get there. Set up a random pattern with a little bit of not random exactly, but we set up a pattern in the Variegate 8, and we use this, like those sliders you see, like if they're all the way to the right, that means that we'll definitely play. If it's all the way to the left, it means that they would definitely not play, but then depending on how far in between they are, you can set how likely it is to trigger something. And now let's add some more sounds. We need a hi-hat because that's a good way of adding a bit of momentum, and we're going to use the Erica Synth's drum sample, which I think is a super powerful module. It's quite deep, but super quick to learn. Like, trust me, yes, there are some menus in there, but it's super light. You can almost learn it without using a manual, really. Right, let's add let's add lots of hi-hats in, but with some slight likelihood of it not playing, just to get a little bit of a rhythmical pattern with the hi-hats. The Erica Synth sample drum also has got built-in effects, so let's use that to our advantage. And often I find that the effects is a good way to just start introducing glitchiness and random things in there. So we're going to use the built-in delay, and then we can set up the CV inputs to modulate those. So I'm going to dial in all the parameters for the delay time, the feedback, and also the mix to see how much of the raw signal we want to keep, and then we just modulate that. I just got a real weakness for really short delay times where you get those carpless type sound, or like comb filter almost. So let's use this sample and hold module that is made by Steady State Fate SSF, which was done in collaboration with YouTuber DivKid. It's a super useful module. I thought it was a bit expensive, but I mean, it's one of the modules I use every single time. It's really, really useful. So let's use that to modulate. We take a trigger output from the Variegate to trigger the sample and hold module every so often and change its values, and then that will pass them on into the Erica Synth sample drum. And now I'm going to start wasting all those valuable, really long cables that I have, which allows me to reach between the two racks. Oh, wrong row. Let's put it in the right channel. You can have two samples playing independently in that module. Sample and hold is such magic. Then you can use the Erica Synth sample drum to attenuate the signal coming in, so you can tame it a bit if it gets a little bit too wild. The other stuff feels a bit dry, and so let's spice that up. Now we are going to get into why we use those signal splitters. One is going into the sound card, another one we plug into the 4MS matrix mixer, which I think is amazing and really good investment for me anyway, because I love in Ableton, for example, I love to use the return channels to randomize how much I send of a signal into various effects and stuff, and that's exactly what you can do with this module. It's got 4 inputs and 4 outputs, and you can say one input and send it to 1 or 2 or 3 or none or all outputs. So I'm going to plug the first channel in into the Monsoon, which is a clone of Mutable Instruments Clouds, and they've also added a few extra controls to the front panel. And it's also good for just adding a bit of volume, and not loudness, but just add a bit of texture and that sort of thing. And I can't work out why this is not doing something. Oh, what am I sending? Oh, it's the hi-hat, which I don't really want to send there, so I am gonna... Let's take another sound. Let's take the bass sound, I think. Still no sound coming through. Why is that? Why is that? Oh, the channel is turned off. There we are. Press the button. All of a sudden you can hear some of that lush reverb, which some people hate and some people like. I find it one of the most, well, the most pleasant reverbs to listen to. Well done, Mutable Instruments, for giving that to us. Alright, let's tweak the little PlayStation joystick on the Twin Peak filter to just change the... Listen to that vibe all of a sudden. Need to address that sort of not snare drum sound. Alright, let's add another effect. We've got the 2HP freeze, which is a little texture buffer thing. So it records a small snippet of audio and then loops that. And then you just get these little stutter and glitch effects. And then you can turn the stutter glitch on and off by sending it gates. So that's what we're doing from, or triggers, that's what we're doing from the Variegate 8. It stops feeling better now. It feels like we are reaching that point where it starts feeling interesting and you can start vibing. Still not super pleased with that snare drum, but we'll address that. modulate the Bassimilus a bit more, and we're gonna, oh, it sounded a bit like snare-like there for a brief moment, but let's just stop pretending that that is a snare and just make it into something else, just something more more texture-like and glitchy. So we're just going to use the Variegate 4 Plus, which is also an amazing module in its own right, compact little sequencer. So I'm just going to send that lots of different CVs into changing the different synthesis modes in the Bassimilus and other things. And also, let's chuck that into the matrix mixer so we can send that to the monsoon and to the grains. All of a sudden, even though this is just a loop, all of a sudden it feels like there's much more to it, and therefore it doesn't really get boring. And I think that's the interesting thing when you make something that is sort of slightly generative, that you just build something that allows itself to change over time, so you never have a static loop that your brain gets too used to. You just introduce some different feelings. Bit unruly, the Bassimilus, but it's interesting. Pitch control, and the other thing that is good with the Variegate 4 or the Variegate 8 Plus, for example, that each individual channel you can change the speed and division. It's still to the same clock, but it can run at a different division or multiplication, so you can create really interesting tracks like that makes them really powerful. I love that bass line. That's I think it's the resonant filter then going into the monsoon that just creates that low bass. Let's introduce another sound. Let's use the SY 0.5, which is a clone of an old-fashioned drum machine called Syncussion. And the 0.5 is referring to the Syncussion having two identical voices, so you can play two drum sounds at the same time. And this is the equivalent to one of those voices. So if I would have two of these, it would be having like a Syncussion. It's an all-analog drum module, which I think sounds super cool. I just don't understand why I haven't seen more of it. So quickly you can get super interesting sounds out of it, and you can CD control all the parameters as well, which just makes it amazing. So we plug that in both to the matrix mixer and also into the sound card. So we've got a little bit of monsoon on there now, a bit of reverb. We can use some more of the sample and hold because we've got a few free channels still there, so we can plug that into the SY 0.5. It's Michigan Synthworks that makes those modules, worth checking out. Let's just try a few different kick drums. Feels like we've lost a little bit of, even though the Bassimilus Iteratus Alto was never really doing the snare job properly, but we need something doing that cuts through in the moody, bubbly stuff. The only thing we got at the moment is the hi-hat, but I think we can do something. And let's try and use a clap from the Erica Synth sample drum. That one is currently only loaded up with pretty much only the stock sounds, because I was clumsy and I managed to break the memory card physically, and I had to get a new one and just load it up with the stock stuff. So I'm going to spend some time loading that up with some of my own samples. It's funny, there's so many ways you can approach modular. This is one way, which is sort of time wasting and you don't really know what you're going to end up with, where I have really planned it out. I just go with whatever feels right and you just end up somewhere. But then I also think it's important that you do what I'm doing here. I'm just doing a multi-track recording, so because you don't really know when you're going to reach that point when you got something interesting, and you can just, as quickly as you got there, you can drift out of it, and you can always find a new point like that, but it's probably not going to be the same. And if you want to make something out of all this, it's good to have the multi-track recordings, and then you can just like pick the parts that sound good and assemble a track from that. And we are soon going to I think we just reach a point, and this video can't be infinitely long, so I'm gonna stop this, and then we're gonna move over to Ableton and take the recordings that we've done and just do something to them, and then so we can sort of finish that 1 minute track thing that I'm gonna post on Instagram. So I'm gonna take I suppose this is an example of, like, sometimes I use Ableton when I do my daily minutes, sometimes I use the modular stuff, sometimes I use some of the other stuff, sometimes I use a combination of it. I'm also trying to learn Touch Designer, which, if you have been checking out my Instagram, some of those visuals when it's not camera work usually is that. So sometimes I sort of want to do something with that. It's more just like doing daily practice. And I know I'm just, sometimes it's sort of, I'm just wondering, like, is this taking away from actually making, in quotation marks, actual music? But I am not sure it does. Well, it does, yes, it definitely does. But also, I think this is part of my learning process, and I've committed to 100 days, and it's a goal, and it would make me, my mind, pleased if I manage to stick to it and deliver. I'm sorry that the Twin Peak filter is partly covered by my utilitarian shelf, but I'll put up a picture of it next to it there so you can see what it looks like, because it is one of those modules that you don't see very often, but I think it just deserves way more praise. Alright, let's stop the recording and head over to here into Ableton. So let's hit stop, and we turn off all the channels, or as in, like, we need to be able to listen to what we have recorded. And as mentioned earlier, if you're able to sponsor me on Patreon, you will be able to download the raw recordings of these different channels, and you will be free to use them as in whatever way you like. I'm just going to trim off the silence in the beginning because I don't think anyone wants that. I'm making them all the same length, so if you want to line them up, it's just going to make it a bit easier. So I'm just trimming them all, but some of them will have more silence in the beginning than the others. And then we are going to do something naughty. It's not really naughty, actually. It's been good chatting to Ned Rush and some other fellow music makers, where you just have a bit of a confession and say, I do things that people who know how to do stuff say you shouldn't be doing them. Like while you're making music, chucking things on the master channel and doing too much compression, and like hearing all these things like, oh, you should never be boosting, you should only be cutting with an EQ, and you should do small increments. But it's okay to do whatever you like, and perhaps especially if you do these daily minutes, like it's your chance to just experiment. And it's part of it just needs to be quick, because you can't spend a huge amount of time every single day of making something perfect, and sometimes you just need some compression. Like, I don't know if that makes me immature, but we'll see. And we also probably need a bit of more glitch, don't we? So when I'm done with this, I'm just going to extract a minute from this and put up on my Instagram, so you will be able to find it there. And maybe it's the other way around. Maybe that's how you ended up at this video, because you watched my daily minute on Instagram, where I probably also mentioned that this video is up on YouTube for you to watch. I also have another confession to make, and that is that I sometimes feel like a musical imposter. And also when I'm speaking to people who experiment with electronic music, that just like I do, but I quite often feel like, oh gosh, I'm going to be found out that I have no clue what I'm talking about, because that's actually partially true, and it's almost part of the process of making this type of music that you just don't really know. But in a sense, I think my music sounds different today than it did 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, or even just 1 year ago, because I have developed in one way or another. And I think that development is because I've just kept doing stuff. And every time you do something you haven't quite done before, like something will stick and some things will not. All right, so I'm adding a little bit of compression here, doing a bit of side chaining into that ambient stuff to let the kick drum cut through a bit more. The other thing that I quite often tend to do is to cut frequencies around 200 hertz. It feels like it's like high bass, low mids, I think. Don't take my word for it. Again, I actually don't have a clue what I'm talking about. But I often find that that's where the mud builds up in my tracks. Maybe it's a combination of also like what my speakers are like and what my headphones are like and what my ears are like, but that's the frequency which I like in moderation, but it just tends to build up because all my channels often have lots of material around 200 hertz, and that just makes it muddy, and therefore I often need to go and cut it through. And here again, I'm doing my little favorite thing of just, oh, wrong channel, where do I need to put it? Is it there? Is it there? Is it there? No, it's not really quite there, is it? Oh yes, here we are. Having short delays, well, delays with short delay times, so you get those wobbly sounds. I don't use many third-party plugins. I use some. The ones I tend to use is the Q3 by FabFilter, which I think is a superior EQ. I'm still using EQ8 here in this instance, but I'm also using Q3, which I think gives me a bit more control over the slope of the curve, and yes, I just find it much more, also just like the size of it makes it much easier to see what's happening, and it allows me to spot peaks. And you can even, I'm not doing it here, but you can even compare different channels just to get a visual representation where you have build up of frequencies. And well, I sort of already know it's going to be to around 200 hertz. And now on the master channel, let's just go dirty. Let's put an OTT, like teenager, too much compression things, but we can dial it back so you just get a flavor of that slappiness. And we can use a drum bus because that often makes things sound better. There's a few things I tend to do with the drum bus. I tend to, the boom thing, which just adds like resonates and decays the sort of low frequencies, which can make kicks boom and things. I tend to like to turn those frequencies down a little bit rather than having the default, which is just a little bit too rumbly for my liking. And also something I often put on the master channel is the saturation plugin, because that just adds a little bit of crispness in the top end. Here we got the Q3 from FabFilter, and here I'm cutting there around 200 hertz, and it's also got built in that compression there, so just like adding that in so you can compress that particular band. And then we can do a steep cut, so we just cut out some of the really low frequencies, just a bit of a rumble. And there it's like so easy because you can see those peaks building up, and you can pull some of those master peaks down. Rush thing that I put in the clap in there, that was one of the effects, part of the Ericsson's sample drums. Another thing that I often do in here is to add a reverb before the signaling. In the master, in the signal chain, I like to use the vintage reverb from Valhalla. I have a really low, it's almost dry signal, but it lets a little bit reverb through, and I usually quickly pick a preset and then modify it a little bit, but one of those sort of short bouncy reverbs, it just adds a bit to the mix somehow. And I also have to admit I like when you have a reverb before a compressor, it just like it's almost like adding not glue, but it just glues it together more. It's almost like maybe it's using, what's that thing when you're soldering, you're just adding, just to make it a bit easier, some, well, I don't know what I'm talking about really. So can you see what I mean? It's just like, it just adds a bit of a vibe to it really. I also think that it struck me the other day that I think compression is a bit like ISO in a camera. I used to be really afraid of cranking the ISO up and would always strive to take photographs with an ISO as low as possible because you get less grain and the pictures are more perfect. But then it gets to a point where, hey, what am I doing? Let's just embrace the noise and just love it for what it is. That's okay. So another thing, since I put this studio together, I've got a dedicated little M1 Mac Mini out in the studio, and that's also a delight, not having to unplug and plug my laptop in and just faff with it, not finding the sound card all of a sudden, whatever. But that also comes with some disadvantages. I need to port some of my VST plugins over to the M1 Mac. Some of them I can run them both, like the Valhalla reverb reverbs and things. I can run both on the M1 and on my laptop, which is great. But there's another plugin called Gullfoss, which is, I mean, it's just some magic juice. In a way, part of me hates it because I don't understand quite what's happening in the background, but it's sort of an AI-based sort of mastering tool, and it sort of cuts frequencies in real time and boosts whatever needs boosting, and it just makes it more pleasant to my ears. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to put it on here in this recording because I don't have it on the M1 Mac, which I'm using here to make this video. Also, I got, for noise suppression, I got some plugins that I bought when they were on sale from, what are they called? Waves, but that's, they certainly don't allow me to run them on multiple computers. Also, I get the impression from their information that I'm only allowed to port it to another device once a year. At least Gullfoss seems to have a thing where you can say like, okay, I'm going to disconnect this device now and I'm going to use this other device, which you can do with the Waves ones as well. But once a year, I just don't understand the logic there. Okay. We've got a bit of stuttering going on now with the beat repeat, which I think is quite an enjoyable effect. There's other ones in Max for Live that does interesting things like the buffer shuffler and things, but this one, and especially, I'm not doing it in this video, but if you automate or like put LFOs or so randomness from the expression control to push and pull where the buffer should be looping and copying from, you get quite a powerful glitch instrument all of a sudden. Anyway, we are almost coming to an end of this video. Yeah, this was maybe not the most amazing track you've ever heard, but maybe there was something in this video that you saw that inspired you to try something, and then that would be success for me. And I hope to see you again. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.